Welcome back to another episode of Discogs Presents, your favorite music review show. This is Rooftop Reviews. Here we are on a bright Brooklyn afternoon. The sun is blazing for me and my special guest, Christian, here.
Hi there. It's good to see you.
We have something a little different for today. Summer movie of the year, Chris Nolan's The Odyssey. We have a lot to share about it. We saw it.
Well, I should say it wouldn't really be my first choice to talk about a movie on a show that's supposed to be about music reviews, but this was kind of a much-needed change of pace for us. Getting out to see The Odyssey this week was my one chance at getting out of the house. It's been a little touch and go. For those of you who watched our previous review of the Rolling Stones' Foreign Tongues, I had some, not entirely positive things to say about that record, and as it turns out, it seems like I angered a certain corner of the internet, middle-aged to elderly men who are extremely fond of the Rolling Stones and seem to think that my critical opinion of the Rolling Stones should mean that I should have threats on my life made to me from one man in particular, a man named Daryl Slotnick. And Daryl, if you're watching, I just want you to know that I'm not living in fear of you and that the things that you have to say to me are as meaningless as the idea that you are the number one fan of the Rolling Stones, because if you even looked at the Guinness Book of World Records, you would see that the record for Rolling Stones trivia is held by a man named Okada Hiroshi, who lives in Japan. And you are not even number one at the thing that you propose to be number one about. So why don't you shut up?
Okay, let's not get too personal on this show. This is just a cultural criticism show. So, yeah, it was I think we had a great time. And you're right, this is a music review show, but just given the huge importance of this release, I felt as the host of this show we need to talk about it.
Also, because the Odyssey is such a part of the DNA of all storytelling, it's so
That's
old,
right.
And everything stems from it. In a way, you could also argue that all music stems from the Odyssey.
That's true. Music is a narrative, just as stories are.
Well, and they make a big point in the Odyssey of talking about how it wasn't written down. It was sang as a song. So, in fact, this is still a music review for you, in a way, in a roundabout way.
Of an adaptation by the famous Christopher Nolan. So let's get into it. Here we go. So I really liked this movie. I've been a big fan of Christopher Nolan for many years now. Ever since The Dark Knight, I loved that movie. And I went back and watched his other features, Batman Begins. I love that. It's almost as good as The Dark Knight. Memento, just an awesome movie, and the way it's told backwards is just really inventive and fun. And he used that trick in this movie. It starts right around the middle, actually, with flashback sequences. It's pretty thrilling, and it's a long story, so even though it starts in the middle, it kind of feels like it's starting at the end. But then it just keeps going when you get to the middle.
That's true. Yeah, that disjointed nature of the storytelling does seem appropriate for the material, because not only are there so many characters, it's like a geographically diverse story. Like, a lot is happening in multiple locations at the same time. Like, it'll be cutting between 3 different Greek islands, and an entirely different thing is happening on each one. And so it helps keep the pacing fresh and keep the energy from dropping.
I was a little worried I'd get bored in this because it is 3 hours long. There aren't many albums that are 3 hours long, so I can sit through most albums. Movies are generally an hour and a half or so. This was double the length of a regular movie, but still, that being said, there's a as my co-host mentioned, there's a lot going on in this movie. So I think the runtime is warranted. Honestly, though, I think it could have been 2-3 times as long.
I have to echo your opinion, Jerry. I sat down to this kind of expecting a slog, and the movie flew by. Classically, I haven't really been a very big fan of Christopher Nolan movies. I can see that they all have merit to them. They're definitely made with technical skill, and the man seems like an enthusiastic, genuine guy who really loves to do what he does.
I mean, he's the president of the Directors Guild of America. He's a pretty big shot guy. He's making the biggest movies. It's like him and James Cameron with the Avatar movies. We also have Christopher Nolan with his Greek tragedy movies. I hope to see David and Goliath next, the story of Hercules, the Hydra, Hades. I would love to see Christopher Nolan do all of these stories. But the first one we get is the Odyssey, and it's honestly just brilliant. I'm super excited for this cinematic universe to really take off.
You mentioned David and Goliath, which is a story that encourages you to root for the little guy. And I think maybe in my mind, Christopher Nolan has been positioned as a bit of a Goliath, and I haven't wanted to like him.
That is true. He's not much of an underdog. He is more like the top dog, He's everyone's boss, and we all know it.
But the funny thing about the Odyssey is that it made Christopher Nolan seem more of an underdog to me. It made him more likable. The movie, for all of its grand scale, it does kind of feel like it's shot from the ground up. There's all these like shaky handheld shots of, low angle shots of the huge giant, or from the side of the boat, when the water's splashing and all the men are trying to get onto the boat and trying to grab the oars. It really feels, he goes to the heart of the action in a way that makes me respect him. And I feel like he's a genuine nerd about the Odyssey. He seems like a real history nerd. He seems like he wants to get people invested in an old story, and I respect him more for that.
Christopher Nolan gives us a human movie about humankind. Even though we have microphones, we have clothing manufacturing factories, we have cameras, we have albums, we have movies and projectors. We sit on this roof. But when it really comes down to it, we're still just animals. We're the human animal. And if you're trapped in the cave with the Cyclops and you need to get out, you'll do anything that is required of you to get out of that situation, even if it means risking the lives of your fellow warriors, your fellow humans.
Yeah, the movie really highlights things you have to do. In that sense, it's an action movie, pure and simple, and I think that's a great strength of it. I think it's very tactile, and it showed me things that previously I didn't really know how to imagine. We all know the famous idea of the Trojan horse, but you can't really wrap your head around all these soldiers being inside a horse. It's so unreal that my brain doesn't even bother to picture it. But then in this movie, it shows it in a very real way. They've built this horse out of wood, and you can see the slats of wood, and all the men are breathing scrunched up inside, and water's getting in. And I'm grateful to Christopher Nolan for allowing me to imagine something that I had never been able to imagine before. That's what part of the magic of cinema.
It's pretty cool. It's what these kind of big budget historical movies are all about, really, is giving us these awesome set pieces.
Yeah. Where the movie fails is precisely in the opposite direction. It's in the parts of the movie where it stops being about stuff that they're doing, and it starts being about like grandiose ideas. At the end of the movie, Anne Hathaway has this one line where she says, like, civilization will rise again. The world is full of mystery.
That's what I was talking about. This is a human film. This is about human stories. But that being said, I was disappointed the Cyclops was just a big human. I was kind of disappointed. I wanted him to be a monster. But then he's just a very, very tall guy.
what kind of monster are you expecting? I mean, he's a human with one eye.
I mean, it really brings into the question what is a monster, though.
Furry?
Because he didn't look like a monster to me, apart from having one eye.
I think it's so cool that the Cyclops cares for a flock of sheep and makes cheese. And that's another example of when the movie is at its best. When they go into the cave and Odysseus sees the cheese and he eats it and he's like, this is damn good. That's a human moment. That's one of the most human moments in the movie.
I will say the human aspects also become the movie's pitfalls. All of the acting was pretty boring. These are just humans after all. They're not very interesting to watch. The core story was really, really good, but all of the scenes where they're talking, I felt quite bored during those.
I tend to agree that a lot of the acting was a little spotty, but part of me thinks that comes from the nature of the action-y shooting. The actor gets a little bit lost in this big production, you know what I mean? I feel like you just say the line and then you move on. There's this one moment where they're just setting off from the beach after the Trojan War. They're about to get on the boat, and then Odysseus' second in command is like, do we have enough provisions? And Odysseus is like, yeah, let's go. And it's like, they would have talked about whether they had enough provisions, like, extensively. They would have made huge plans before leaving. It really took me out of it, and it seemed like this moment, this really obviously stupid moment, and I could just envision them shooting the scene and being so caught up in the beach and the lighting of it that, like, they didn't even notice that it was really stupid for him to just say, do we have enough provisions? There's stuff like that in the movie.
It's like an epic movie, though, so that part I actually thought was cool, because they just leave it to, yeah, it's fine. But when they actually talk about feelings and the storyline, I got really bored. I liked seeing the action, I liked the cool Spider-Man-like quips, but I wasn't too into the conversations overall.
I was impressed by Matt Damon's performance. He's usually pretty boring, but I thought he had a nice take on Odysseus, because rather than play Odysseus as the classic sly, cunning, braggadocious character that he traditionally is, he played him as a strict pragmatist, and he does come up with lots of cunning solutions to problems, but he does it just because he wants to live. And it also brought me deeper into the world of the movie, because it made me more aware that these, they're in a cave with a monster, and there's a rock in front of the door. On the one hand, it's a huge, fantastical, larger-than-life problem, but on the other hand, it's a very practical, nuts-and-bolts problem. What are you going to do to get out of there? And Matt Damon played Odysseus as a man that you could really trust, and it made me understand him better.
Well, I do think Matt Damon he's pretty good, but I think probably would have been better with Leonardo DiCaprio. Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies. It's a terrific album. I could imagine this being really nice to hear as you walk out of the cinema. If you're someone who goes straight on their phone walking out of the cinema, I would put in your earphones and throw this album on. It's a really nice kind of cleanse from the intense Greek action.
Well, it's kind of a cleanse from all the masculinity, because the men of the zombies are a little bit effeminate. They're kind of sensitive, and they're not afraid of a little gentleness and a little tenderness, and I think it's important to balance, because it's good to have burly patriarchal men, but it's also good to get the flip side. I mean, we like effeminate men.
I mean,
well.
That's also why I loved the scene where they turn back into men from pigs, and it's a very tender moment. They're all these big, muscly, chiseled men, but they're all, vulnerable. Their armor's in the backyard still. They haven't got dressed yet. It's a very tender moment. I feel like the Zombies could have even played then. It might have worked. I don't know. But definitely this is a great album as well. I'm going to give the album 9 out of 10. I think it's a terrific album.
The album's pretty great. It's especially great because it's really short. It doesn't have a lot of filler. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I'd add 8.5. Let's say 8.5. It's great. It's a classic, though. You probably already know it, which is why we're just giving it a brief recap, because everybody loves that album. I hear it's playing in coffee shops all the time.
And the movie, The Odyssey, I think this was a really great action movie. Made you remember what life is all about, which is a scary thing to think about, but I think it's a welcome thought in this day and age. I'm super excited for to see what Christopher Nolan does next, but for the moment, I think he hits it out of the park with the Odyssey. I'll give it a 9 out of 10.
The Odyssey was great. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Christopher Nolan, I'm starting to come around to you, or at least I'm going to end my beef with you because it's not productive. It really wasn't serving me well, and I don't want to be a kind of stick in the mud guy. It's hard as a critic because you have to tell it like it is, but me and Christopher Nolan, if I met him on the street, I'd shake his hand.
I would love to shake his hand, get a little of that cinematic magic dust on my hand. That would be great. So thank you for watching this episode of Discogs Presents Rooftop Reviews with Disc Den, your favorite music review show. As we said earlier, this was a bit of a special cinema episode.
We'll talk about music more next time.
Yeah, next week we have a very exciting release from a little-known pop star who previously had a very famous album that named a whole summer. We'll be back next week with Disc Den Rooftop Reviews. See you then.